Welcome everyone, and thank you, Jess. As just mentioned, Mike is co-founder and currently serves as Chief Strategy Officer at Cloudera. And before that, he was CEO of a little company called Sleepy Cat, which actually probably wins the award for Best Enterprise Company Name Ever. And that eventually sold to Oracle in 2006, and then Mike went on to co-found Cloudera. So everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Mike. So Mike, this talk is going to be interactive. I'm going to have a bunch of questions for you, and then a lot of folks in the audience are really excited to have some Q&A.
Outstanding.
To kick things off, we're subjecting you to a little bit of a torture. Okay. We have a workbench signature question that we're kicking off with for all these founders up front.
And it was not in the pre-brief, right?
we kept that one out.
All right.
And in the vein of do, date, or dumb, we're going to ask you 3 company names, and who would you like to sell to, partner with, and screw over. So those and we're gonna, the 3 companies are SAP, Microsoft, and kicking it old school, Oracle. So sell to, partner with, and screw over.
Every enterprise founder worth his salt is going to say, I don't want to sell, right? You know, if you had asked me about Microsoft a couple of years ago, I would have been pretty resolutely bearish. I didn't think the company was on a very interesting track under the former CEO. The new guy's got some moves though. I'm pretty impressed by what Satya's been doing. You know, it's going to be a long, tough transformation of that business. But you know, if you had to toss your lot in with somebody who was pretty interesting right now, I think you might sell to Microsoft. Partner with, that one's easy. We already partner pretty deeply with Oracle. They resell Cloudera on their big data appliance. And by the way, on that big data appliance, they also have a NoSQL database called Oracle NoSQL that is, wait for it, Berkeley DB. So the Sleepy Cat code. So every bit of software on there was
World's class.
That's right. And then, look, you don't wake up in the morning and think, who am I going to Roger? I will say that SAP is slower moving in the enterprise space than I think is probably healthy for it. I don't know if this is going to be broadcast. If so, folks at SAP, I regret saying that. And hey, give me a call. Maybe we can move a little bit faster. But I think that there's a big install base there. There is some interesting product work happening at SAP. I like what they're doing with HANA, for example. But I think there is maybe less embrace of real hardcore customer requirements and more embrace of the installed base and the revenue stream. And that's always an opportunity to be a little bit disruptive.
Great, thanks for those answers. So to kick things off, can you describe to business users in the audience, and we have a mix of, just for your perspective, we have folks from the business side, IT side, we have large corporates, we have startups, probably some investors and grad students too. Can you define Cloudera without saying the word big data or Hadoop?
Lots and lots of enterprises have been information driven for a long time, right? They measure the transactions that they do with their customers, they pay attention to customer sentiment, how they're doing in that domain. So they've been collecting information and analyzing it to run their businesses better. It's been a pretty expensive thing to do. Back in the day, we built systems that could store gigabytes of data because gigabyte was a lot of data. It was pretty hard. In the 90s, for example, to get your hands on a terabyte of data. Pretty hard not to do that today. You got to be aggressive at getting rid of data if you don't want to crush the terabyte boundary. And a terabyte of data in the systems we were building back then, you know, $40,000 list, $20,000 street to store that much data. As the numbers get bigger, as you get more and more data, that number scales linearly, but your ability to analyze it doesn't scale linearly. At some point, you just hit a wall. You can't pay attention to all of that data. The result is that for years, all you enterprise users have been aggressively shoveling data into the dump. Sometimes, if you're really sophisticated, you write it for tape and hand it to Iron Mountain, and they carry it off to a salt mine somewhere. And it's a fantastically expensive way to delete it. It turns out now, with some magic that Google invented in the early zeros, that you can store enormous amounts of information reliably on pretty low-cost commodity hardware. All of the disk on a whole bunch of servers gets ganged together, you get replication, it's reliable, it's all wonderful. More importantly though, there is processing power scattered among all of it, right? So you got lots and lots of CPUs hanging out near all those disks. If you want to ask a question of a large amount of your own data, you can actually send that question out to all those CPUs and they can all look at their own little fragment of the data and think about it. It's a way for me to say to you, that problem with scalable analytics, that's a 90s problem. That's not a 2010s problem. We can really scale to very large amounts of information. Used to be, enterprises would keep track of a week's or a month's, or maybe if they were really spendy, a quarter's worth of point of sale transaction data. These days, you can keep 10 years worth of that data around. You can look at customer buying patterns over time. You can actually ask the last time a Category 5 hurricane wandered across the Florida Panhandle, what happened, right? You'd never be able to ask that before because the last time the hurricane wandered across the Panhandle, you had put that data on the tapes for Iron Mountain and sent it away. So we let enterprises do what they did before, but at modern scale. Able to ask questions of way more data, able to ask way more interesting questions of that data as well. Real time using sophisticated machine learning, statistical processing. Different world, data will change virtually every endeavor of human activity, and the platforms that came out of the consumer internet and now moved into the enterprise are going to make that possible. And Cloudera is here to help.
So on that point about consumer internet, people said that when Hadoop was really getting off the ground, it was geeky tech to help sell ads. What are some of the strides over the last few years that you guys have made within the enterprise to really show business value?
A few things have been critical. So we tell this story about as much data as you like, don't worry, it's really cheap to store. When Hadoop was born, it was used at Google to ingest the internet, right? That's a pretty big data problem. It was used in places like Facebook and Yahoo to serve up news or status update content. And in that world, security just wasn't a problem, right? If you break into the Yahoo server, you're going to steal a news story. Like, who cares, right? It turns out banks and hospitals and insurance companies have a rather more nuanced view. They do not want bad guys to get their data. Driving security into that open source, organically grown infrastructure has been a ton of work, but we've done it. So you can now put PII into one of these Hadoop clusters, secure it, you've got user and role-based authentication access, all of the goodness that enterprise users have come to expect from their data warehouse vendors and their OLTP vendors. So that stuff works. A bunch of data governance as well. Who touched it? What do they do with it? You know, the regulators show up with a request for data in hand. You can actually answer their questions. Most importantly though, one of the big knocks on Hadoop way back in the day was, yeah, there's this thing called MapReduce, and as long as you're a Java programmer and willing to tolerate batch mode latencies and you're willing to master a new programming paradigm, it might be able to solve some problems for you. A lot of business problems didn't look like that. A lot of business problems wanted to speak SQL, wanted to use simple search frameworks, wanted to do new kinds of analyses, machine learning, for example. The platform in the last years has gotten way more real time and way more flexible. There are a lot more analytic frameworks in the box now than there used to be. So we're seeing real-time, secure, and regulatory regime compliant workloads now move into the clusters. This year, next year, are going to be pretty big deals. We're going to see a lot of apps start to show up natively built on that platform.
So to dive deeper on some of the points you just mentioned around real-time, secure, regulatory friendly, that exists today, but from the journey of when Hadoop was first getting started and really Cloudera was getting going, trying to sell, can you walk some of the entrepreneurs in the audience how that process worked? Was it fake until you make it? Was it a lot of consulting work? How did you guys handle that?
One of my competitors made great hay with a comment that I made some years ago, but I stand by it. You guys know how to build reliable enterprise software? You build unreliable enterprise software and ship it. It sucks for your early customers. It sucks for your early customers, but they're early adopters and they've learned to live with some of that pain. They help vendors drive enterprise capabilities into the platform. So look, today, I tell you flat out, we have the best, the most flexible, the most secure, the most stable big data platform on the planet. Nobody does it better than we do. It's not that we're done, by the way. There's still a lot of work that we want to do to further secure and further stabilize the platform. but it's able to handle a bunch of workloads because we've been doing this for 7 years, right? Here in New York City, we've been working with major financial services institutions. As early as 2009, Wall Street banks were already playing with the software. Now, it evolved along with their requirements. And you know, the security stuff and the real-time stuff that I'm talking about, those are relatively recent additions. The data governance stuff was driven entirely by our healthcare and our financial services clients. It's not really fake it till you make it, right? You know the innovator's dilemma story. Most software starts out kind of crappy and people don't take it seriously, but if you can get it in customer hands, it evolves pretty quickly. A lot of people knocked Hadoop early because it looked like not very good stuff compared to what Oracle and Teradata and Microsoft and IBM were shipping. And that was true in the day. Every single one of those vendors now ships this software. It's a part of everybody's strategy. So paying attention to customer requirements, seeking out demanding customers early was very important.
And were some of these banks and the healthcare providers some of the early customers where you weren't fully baked yet? And did they have the patience while you were going through the process, understanding the requirements?
They recognize, as we do, that the partnership is important. They bring the requirements, we bring the technical skill, and we work together to find the workloads that they'll handle now and implement the features that are required for additional workloads down the road. So we're doing a lot more at those companies today than we were doing just a few years ago, and we're confident that we'll be doing more still a few years out. So yeah, absolutely, we found good collaborative partners. I would say if you're an entrepreneur building a business, you should find a couple of customers who are going to drag you north over broken glass by your hair. They will make you a better company, they will make your product better, and if you get just a few of them, you'll have the capacity to take care of them. They will prepare you for the rest of the market when the rest of the market catches up with what they're doing and what you can do for them. But it was true at SleepyCat as well. In fact, you know, we were talking about Morgan Stanley. It's probably outside the statute of limitations from the United States publicly that Morgan Stanley was a licensee of Berkeley DB, and that relationship was very important for us. We found customers who forced us to make the platform better, and they drove our product roadmap in a direction that bought us a whole bunch more users down the road.
So I can tell you from the bank perspective, in my former role in the office of the CIO, these folks are thriving on new tech to remain competitive. How did you, though, from the entrepreneur side, especially looking back at the SleepyCat days, validate what large enterprise actually made sense to work with, who would give you the time of day and who you could learn from in a partnership?
The first thing I want to say, I mean, you hinted at this. You guys, I'm not going to brag much, but if you can run a company named SleepyCat and actually get banks to buy your shit, you're pretty good. Brag.
Was your logo going to be a lolcat if it was made these days?
No. Actually, there were a lot of people asked us. This television program Friends that I don't know that much about, but this program Friends was on, and apparently there's a character on that show that sings a song called Smelly Cat. And so a lot of people asked us if we had ripped it off from that. Yeah. Anyway, so the answer is, if you look in financial services in particular, telecommunications a little bit like this, these are industries that are very technology heavy. They're early adopters of almost all new enterprise technology. They drive their business as technology businesses. So they're usually hungry for and looking for technology that's going to let them do novel stuff. So segue from the SleepyCat days back to the Cloudera days, we discovered folks on Wall Street who already had a clue about Hadoop even before we got started. They were curious about it, they were playing with it in IT. When we appeared on the scene, we were a great partner for them. We were able to offer them expertise and influence over product roadmap.
Were you going bottoms up back then?
So two things happened. One was, yeah, bottoms up folks would kind of reach out to us. We'd go into the IT org and make some friends. But then, hey, you know, you pick some good venture capital investors and they'll have relationships that are useful. All the big banks here have ongoing relationships with the tier 1, tier 2 VC firms. They're looking for interesting tech companies. And so your investors ought to be able to help you find your way into some of those organizations. Some of our very best FinServ relationships began by way of venture capital intros by Ping Lee at Axel. So shout out to Ping, that was fantastic for us. Anyway, it's not hard to find the users it's hard to establish the credibility that those users want. And that's why you got to find demanding customers and really put yourself to work on their use cases to make them successful.
It's funny, actually, I remember back when Hadoop was getting off the ground and everyone wanted to play with it, but there was a central group that was collecting use cases and saying, can you do this on Teradata? Can you do this with some other just relational database internally? We really need to validate that it is for Hadoop. Were you helping folks understand what makes sense for you guys to work with and what doesn't to really demonstrate the full power?
Well, the hype was so hot in the early days that it was clear that, Hadoop was going to destroy the data warehouse market, totally take over all of the storage space, and in its spare time cure cancer. It turns out that Hadoop is really good at a whole bunch of workloads you could never attack before, right? Very large amounts of data, very sophisticated analytic frameworks. The data warehouse products are outstanding at online analytic processing applications. So you build a big cube and you spin it and you fly through it in real time, and they're just awesome at that. And it's no surprise, right? They co-evolved with that problem for 30 years. I spent 25 years building relational databases. We weren't dumb, right? We built good products aimed at the business problems of the time. Long way to say, what traditional databases do well, what Hadoop does well, are generally complementary. There is some overlap in the middle, and of course users to choose to migrate workloads to one platform or the other where that overlap happens. But we're not focused on how we compete with an enterprise data warehouse, an online transaction processing engine. Teradata, Oracle, Microsoft, these are wonderful partners of ours. Rather, we're interested in finding ways to handle huge amounts of complex data that would never have been ingestible previously, and integrating with their data warehouse frameworks so they can use the tools and the platforms they know in the ways they know, but do it better because now they've got a monster storage and analytic engine off to the side that can pre-process, ingest, and deliver new results to the existing system.
Into the logic.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to suck cost out of the data center. A lot of CIOs like that.
So you just said before curing cancer, and I've actually read a bit recently around Cloudera in the hospital, blending with IoT. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I use that statement glibly in what I was saying, but the first thing I'll say is at Cloudera, we're just a bunch of database guys, right? We don't do medicine, we don't do finance, we don't do insurance. We build a platform that can store huge amounts of data and can process and analyze it in new ways. And people are building really interesting applications on top of it. The production of food, we're going from 7 billion people to 9 billion people in the next 35 years. The delivery of clean water and energy globally and at costs, treatment of meaningful diseases, all of these important social problems can be attacked now with more data in ways they never could before. We're beginning to see wet bench lab science driven by analytics that happen in computer science first. And then we'll go explore molecules that can be used to treat disease based on the output of our informatics systems. And indeed, here in New York City, Jeff Hammerbacher, Cloudera co-founder and chief scientist, is at Mount Sinai Medical School using Cloudera's technology and his considerable intellect with a team there to attack mental health diseases and other diseases, looking for genetic causes, environmental causes, how all of those things interact to create chronic and acute outbreaks, right, and find ways to intervene. Delivery of good healthcare outcomes at affordable cost is also really important. No matter how you feel about Obamacare, better care cheaper and better outcomes is really important. So now we can look over huge populations of patients, the treatment they got from different doctors for similar conditions. We can reason about that, find patterns of treatment that were effective, and recommend to the rest of the doctors in the network that they follow the best practices. We simply couldn't do that before. We had EMRs, but we didn't have a way to ingest medical imagery and handwritten lab reports and patient drug regimens, and so all of these really different kinds of data, and analyze them at the same time. Now we can do that, and we're attacking problems that were simply not tractable before.
So switching gears a second to the competitive landscape, we have a bunch of entrepreneurs in the room, some of whom are working on some open source stuff. You guys have competed against fellow open source companies, which we won't name, and been the clear leader in the space. What advice do you have to differentiate when someone's working and supporting open source in a highly competitive landscape?
Let me step back one thing right first, and let me talk about something else. Every company worth its salt is going to have meaningful competitors. If you're attacking a problem that people really care about, you're not going to be the only person working on it, right? If you really have no competition, you should look around, right, for the fool in the room, because it's probably you, right? So any space that's interesting, any business problem that's meaningful, will create competitors. And you know, I mean, we all say that's a good thing. In fact, that is a good thing for our customers. It forces us all to be better. There are days when I wish that I could just take a hit out on a whole bunch of people and nobody would know. But look, it's the landscape that we all live in. In open source in particular, I think you got to be pretty nuanced about how you make money and how you go to market. This is my third or fourth open source company, depending on how you count. SleepyCat, which got sold to Oracle, delivered an open source embedded database for DB. Go back to Illustra and some other places that I've been previously, also used open source software. I've never seen a pure play open source vendor get north of 50 million bucks in revenue and remain independent for the long term. What happens is those companies get bought. It happened to SleepyCat, it happened to JBoss, it happened to MySQL, it happened to SpringSource, it happens over and over again. The sole example is Red Hat. Sole counterexample rather is Red Hat. And I would tell you that Red Hat is a freak of nature and an accident of the time at which it grew up. The dot-com crash was ideally timed. Red Hat IPO'd, the markets crashed, every single CIO on the planet was looking to slash licensing costs, and there was one company with an open source, very low cost operating system to step in and take that business. Red Hat's gotten to $2 billion or so in revenue. Cloudera, we announced revenues publicly in February. We did more than 100 million bucks last fiscal year. We're the second company in history after Red Hat to do that. We continue to grow very quickly. Major contributors to open source. We believe deeply that platform software in enterprises has to be open source. CIOs insist on that. They don't want to be locked in. But unless you have some meaningful differentiation, IBM, EMC, big vendors can walk in, pick up that common good, and give it away to their customers, right? They can monetize it by selling services, by parachuting in a whole bunch of people in blue shirts and khakis to do consulting work. They can sell complementary proprietary products that sit on top or alongside. So they got a lot of ways to drive money out of their customers. If you're competing with those guys on price, the benchmark is zero. They will give your stuff away. And we have seen that in the current market. Our strategy is to complement our open source product with differentiated, non-open source management monitoring administrative tooling. So we've got some juju that IBM can't pick up and point at us, right? We're uniquely good at how you administer a Hadoop cluster because we've been doing it for a long time. We've rendered our expertise into software, and that is the bulwark against that competition. That allows us to differentiate in the market, to have a real reason for somebody to come to us rather than we're the cheapest guy. The cheapest guy is not a good spot to be in. There are a lot of vendors doing a real good job of losing money in open source software, including in big data right now.
So you mentioned IBM and EMC, and it makes me think of a trend going on right now when compared to 2000. These days it seems that the big companies, they're not getting the inorganic growth that they were a few years ago, where they were able to acquire a lot of companies to kind of figure out new product lines and revenue streams. What do you think about the current environment?
So I've noticed the same thing you have. A couple things. I think that private capital is so plentiful and so easily available right now that there's less urgency for entrepreneurs either to IPO or to sell their businesses. I mean, witness the deal that we took down last year with Intel. We sold 18% of the company to Intel, raised $740 million bucks. On top of the $160 we brought in to raise $900 million about this time last year for a software company, right? Capital was easy for us to get. The strategic relationship with Intel has been huge for us, but that kind of capital and capital availability is a relatively new thing. There are a bunch of reasons right now why you don't want to be publicly traded, right? The reporting and regulatory requirements are worse than they've been in a long time. And so sheltering from the public markets is a good thing. And that's why you see companies like Facebook and Google and others waited a long time in historical terms before they went public.
So that makes sense from the startup side, but what are the incumbents going to do then to survive?
So the incumbents are sitting on absolutely obscene cash piles. Right? I mean, you look at those companies and they've got huge money. The challenge
towards dividends and share buybacks, though.
Well, mostly they're parking it. Well, actually, I should be careful. A lot of them are my partners and customers. I'm sure they're all excellently run organizations. The problem right now is that valuations, at least in the space that we're active, are very, very high. And by the way, we suffer from this. We're buying right now about a company a quarter. And you know, you walk into a room with 6 people and no revenue, and they've got an idea they're worth $100 million, right? It's a different world. If you are a publicly traded company subject to the oversight of the public markets, you simply can't pay that kind of premium for a no revenue business or a small revenue business, right? What's happening is valuations have put a bunch of these companies just out of reach. I think one of a couple of things is going to happen. Maybe there will be a valuation correction, or maybe one of the companies with very strong leadership is just going to decide, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to make the decisions that we believe we need to make for strategic reasons and execute. And there are some great examples in the market. All of Apple, Google, IBM, Oracle actually SAP for that matter, have plenty of cash and have sufficiently strong leadership that they could do that. Everybody's been sitting on the sidelines for a while. I can't talk about the culture or the psychology that's holding them back right now, but I don't think it lasts forever.
Will they go public like Riverbed, Dell, TIPCO, Informatica, etc., so that they're not under that scrutiny?
So you mean, yeah, will they take themselves private again?
And then maybe make those acquisitions?
Entirely possible. I mean, Dell is a very interesting company to watch right now. And I'll tell you the truth, I was caught by surprise by the Informatica transaction. I did not know that was going to come, but Sohaib is a very smart guy, and I think he's given himself a little bit of insulation from public market scrutiny.
Yeah, especially as they transition to a software company. They'll probably have to make a few more acquisitions along the way.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I want to switch gears to founders a little bit, another trend that we're seeing. It used to be back in the day, you'd have someone from EMC that would leave, or Cisco, so many years of domain expertise and start a company. But these days it seems Facebook, Yahoo, Google, all these web scale companies are really starting to spin out the next gen of enterprise tech that is now used by all these top banks that before would have even laughed at the thought. So how are you thinking about this trend?
I'm a database guy, 25 years in the industry. I was one of the authors of Postgres at Berkeley. I did a lot of that fundamental work. I was at a whole bunch of industrial and academic research labs working on databases, and we totally whiffed on this big data thing, you guys. I just didn't see it coming. All of us in our sector read the Google papers on Google File System and MapReduce back in the day, and we all thought it was a joke. Right? We didn't take it at all seriously. It wasn't aimed at the problem that we had. It is interesting to note that the technology that's most successful in the enterprises now is coming out of consumer companies. And no absence, right? I mean, you know, the iPhone that I have in my pocket is a delightful user experience. And when was the last time you said that about Oracle Enterprise Manager? The DNA to create those wonderful experiences, and my life of wanting to be able to use this device to interact with my systems at work, I mean, that is the trend of the future. Cloudera was co-founded by a guy from Facebook, from Yahoo, from Google, and from Oracle, me. And you can tell one of those guys is not like the others. Right? So I think understanding how to build that web-scale, consumer-friendly style software is very important. I think if you're going to engage with enterprise buyers, it does help to have some enterprise flour in the loaf of bread as well. You want to know how to talk to that kind of buyer. So I think we had a pretty good mix of folks who had built the technology, and me and a few other folks who really knew how to talk to the buyers.
So we have a view here at Workbench, based in New York, from the enterprise startups that we work with, and also the buyers on the other side of the equation, that people really do appreciate that domain expertise and actually just knowing how to navigate an enterprise sales process. But it seems in the Valley, it's all about how can we just get some cool tech out and hire a lot of inside salespeople. Where do you think the future is? Is it one or the other, or somewhere hybrid in between?
We look a lot more like the workbench model, right? So we've got high-powered, focused account executives responsible for a handful of very large accounts. They're backed by a team of technical experts that can get in and install the software. You know, what we're selling is large-scale, complicated, distributed systems infrastructure, right? It stands to reason that should be hard and should be a very high-touch sale. You look at some of the Valley companies that have those big inside sales forces, think about Dropbox or Box, right? Cloud storage, right? I mean, you really don't need to send a guy to the bank to talk about cloud storage, right? You can have that conversation because it's a fairly simple concept, everybody understands it. I think that model is fine when you have the sort of product that can be sold effectively over the telephone. But in a market that's growing and evolving as quickly as this one, with a technology that's new, I think a more traditional enterprise sales force absolutely makes sense.
By the way, I'll give Aaron kudos. Back when I was at Morgan, he actually came in person for the meeting with the CIOs, because unlike Dropbox, that was really focused on consumer, he came in because the whole challenge of trying to build a platform out and deal with regulatory stuff and use cases,
yeah,
he got it pretty early on.
And any day when Aaron Levy shows up at your office is a pretty good day. That dude is actually, I like him a lot. He has the best hair in enterprise software.
That's our quote of the night. Maybe we can So what excites you the most thinking about the future? What challenges are out there? What's going to be the next big thing within the data and analytics space that's going to solve an enterprise problem?
The platform is now more or less built out. There's still a bunch of work we have to do to solidify, stabilize, and further secure, and we'll do that because that's what we get paid to do. I think in the next couple of years what we're going to see happen is the emergence of a new class, a new generation of data applications. All of the stuff that we've used for decades was purpose-built to run on relational databases, and it speaks SQL fluently, but it doesn't know how to deal with 1,000 servers underneath the covers that can run sophisticated machine learning workloads and deliver results in real time. We're going to see apps begin to emerge that know that there's a new generation of infrastructure and that offer end-user friendly interfaces and access to data and insights, right? So far, you've had to go hire yourself a couple of data scientists and a Python programmer in order to really build applications on this big data infrastructure. You ought to be able to go to SAP, go to Oracle, go to IBM and buy those application suites. You ought to be able to just go get the anti-money laundering and portfolio risk scoring products to run on the data that you bank on. And that's now beginning to be true. I'm excited about that. Really, you're excited about anti-money laundering applications? Yeah, because it's going to drive.
We're excited too.
Yeah, well, it's going to drive huge consumption of the platform, right? We believe that big data, as a market, will be strictly larger than traditional business data market. We're going to be able to drive value from thousands of times more data and help people profit from it in new ways. The relational database market, sort of all in license services and applications, about $100 billion a year. If the data volumes are 1,000 times bigger, it stands to reason we should be able to get at least 10 times the value out of the data. And if that's true, there's a legitimate claim that this is going to be a $1 trillion a year software market. We haven't seen it yet, but I believe it to be possible in principle. And I'm pushing that idea very hard. Any of you entrepreneurs that want to build these applications, I think you make a lot of money selling apps to business users. That's what people pay a premium for. And if you build it on Cloudera, then every time you're successful, the cash register rings in Palo Alto. We're very happy about that.
There you go. So before I turn it over to the audience, one last question. What's your thought about New York's enterprise tech community?
This is a really interesting place. Are there any Boston people in there? Just raise your hand if you're from Boston. Good. Let's diss Boston.
They're not all from back.
No. Boston used to be sort of the second city of venture capital and startups. Something really remarkable is happening in greater New York right now, in Jersey and in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. The data science community is, I would say, strictly more interesting here than it is in the Valley right now. There are a lot of really interesting companies coming up. Used to be that if you were in New York City, you were either finance or fashion. Those were the two things that you could start a company doing. there are a whole bunch of really compelling technology companies starting here right now. I spend a bunch of my time here. I'm actually on the board of directors of a nonprofit called DataKind that's using data science skills in order to help nonprofits, NGOs, achieve their missions better. And that's a thing that I think really only could have happened in the milieu that is New York City right now. I love it here. If I were young, I would probably be here and not in California. I just think there's a real ferment happening in New York right now that is, it feels to me different than what we're feeling in the Valley.
We'd love to hear that, we agree. Does anyone in the audience have questions?
Question about pricing negotiation. When you go in and talk to a large organization, how do you negotiate prices? How do you find the right value that's being delivered to both parties?
Is the question how we do that at Cloudera now, or how we did it in years 1 to 5, or again 1 to 3?
Do years 1 to 3, yeah.
Yeah, so the answer is you don't have a clue how to set your prices, right? You might be able to benchmark them against some other products in the market. So we looked at other players that you could sort of say had big data pricing. We looked at the Teradata price sheet and what they charge per terabyte. And we use that to inform our thinking about how we should go to market. But especially for your very earliest customers, I'd say a couple things. You want them to pay you a meaningful amount of money. And the reason is they're not going to take you seriously if they didn't pay you a reasonable amount of money. If you're working for them for free, they're not going to pay attention to you. Right? If somebody had to pony up like 100K, you know what? There is a person in that organization responsible for demonstrating that that was not a stupid idea, right? So they'll be sure that they engage with you on it. And especially early, we would take almost any kind of deal at Cloudera. We would write up what we called a support contract. What that meant was we would show up and do whatever the heck you needed us to do. We wanted to get very close to our customers, figure out where they were having trouble, and look for opportunities to drive our products to basically build a business, right? So that very close engagement was part building the reputation, but also part market exploration. So, you know, for customers 1 to 20, whatever deal you can take down is a good deal. And by the way, 3 or 4 years later, a few of those early customers are going to be saying to you, but I buy for $15,000 a year. And you should not regret that deal, right? You should go ahead and let them continue to buy at whatever crack pipe price you signed in the early years because you needed the customer. Those guys are very, very valuable. I've never regretted a deal that we signed. I have wished that I could go back and retrade the terms years later, but we haven't done that. If you can benchmark against others in the industry just to sort of set a framework, that's good. And the other thing I'll advise is if you're walking in and talking price with a customer, you got to have ice water in your veins, man. Practice in front of the mirror at home, right? Say it's going to be $10,000, and if they don't blink, say per user. And if they don't blink, say per week. And I mean, you know, when you finally get a twitch, you're there. So, but you really do want to, and if you're an engineer, right, you're not good at that stuff. You need to do that. You need to drive enough revenue that it's meaningful for the business, and also that the customer has an investment in success. Make sense? Good.
Can you share inflection points in terms of whether it's dollars or features or number of customers? When did you know you had hit an inflection point? And maybe there was more than one.
When we hit $5 million in revenue, which was pretty early in our lives, we were convinced that we had a winner on our hands. At that point, we were able to standardize our contracts, standardize our pricing, even standardize our selling motion a little bit. That was sufficient adoption that we were convinced that the business was going to make it for the long term. Rather than talk about like number of customers and revenue levels and stuff, though, let me talk about the other thing that mostly I worry about, and that's people. So we started Cloudera. We were 4 people huddled around a borrowed conference table at the AdMob offices in San Mateo, California. We moved into our first office. We were 14 bodies in Burlingame, California. The experience of running that company, the way that you make decisions and deliberate internally and drive alignment, is wildly different from that experience at just 50 people and at 100 people. There are points in the life of a company where your employee base is too big to continue to operate the way that you have. So we've always had a very open, communicative, collaborative culture at Cloudera. So when we were in Burlingame, we were 14 to say 30 people. We took down a funding round, and I sat down with the whole company, and I said, okay, here's how much money we raised. Here is how much I diluted all of you when I did that, right? I wanted everybody in the business to be totally aligned behind what we were doing and faith in management and know what we were working toward. And we were super, super communicative. At like 150 people, I could no longer be quite that transparent, although we've done a pretty good job of still being pretty open. When it was 14 people around a table, I could tell people how much I had diluted them, and one of the employees, and I'm thinking of a particular guy right now, would pound the table and scream at me in front of everybody, right? At 300 people, that just doesn't happen anymore. So we continue to run these all hands meetings once a month. We run it by video, you participate no matter where you are on the planet. But I don't get really interesting questions at those meetings anymore. And so if we're going to drive this culture of communication, collaboration, we've had to build a bunch of infrastructure to do that. Managers have to behave the way that leadership used to behave. And, I really think that recruiting and retaining top caliber talent is why we've been so successful, and I fret a lot about that. 50, 100, and 500, those tiers were just very big deals. I actually stepped out of the CEO role. I was CEO when we started the company at 430 people. In retrospect, I should have done it around 300 people. My life is way better not being CEO. But also the talent and skills required in that job are different from what they were in the early days. And being sure that you've got the right people in the right place and you're adapting your processes. That's been a constant challenge, not struggle. I mean, it's the main thing I pay attention to.
So the next time if you do another company after Cloudera, when you're 6 and 14, you'll do it at Workbench, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I'll get one of these really inexpensive Manhattan lofts.
Hey, so quick question. In the conversation, we kind of discussed where you guys started, maybe in the early days as a Hadoop distribution, evolving to a preprocessor for relational databases and data warehouses. Then in the pricing discussion, you talked about how you compare yourselves to the data warehouses. Where do you see yourself evolving? Are you going to be the data repository and the data processor for the organization? Are you going to work alongside what exists? What's the end point?
We talk about our product as an enterprise data hub, so you can store a lot of data in it, and it connects to other data platforms in your data center and users and applications. And so it's a place where you can put a lot of data and get at it in a bunch of different ways. I honestly believe that this platform is going to be a major, if not the major, repository for enterprise data. I don't think it is curtains for the existing enterprise data warehouse and OLTP products. Architecturally, Hadoop is ill-suited to large-scale distributed transaction processing. I mean, that's been an AI hard problem for many, many years, and it's no easier today than it was before. And because it's shared nothing, there are certain workloads that just don't run well, right? So what you can do in an OLAP system like Teradata, you really can't do well in this distributed shared nothing system. Long way for me to say, I believe that there are going to continue to be the existing products that businesses have relied on for a couple of decades. They're very good products, right? The opportunity is not to go compete for old workloads. The opportunity is to unlock value in data that didn't exist before or that used to get burned to the ground because we couldn't afford to keep it, right? If we can drive data, if we can drive real value, if we can cut costs, but more importantly, if we can drive new revenue, new profit out of that data, man, we're going to be hugely successful. And I don't have to go bang on Teradata's door or Matisse's door in order to get money. We've got a big opportunity in front of us. I think data centers are going to get more diverse. There's going to be more different products running in them for the next 5 years. All of the relational products are going to continue to get better because Hadoop is a big goad to them to improve their products. We're going to be doing the same. It may be that we end this sort of Darwinian explosion and go into a consolidation phase some years out, but I think it's years before we're there.
So you're going to stay anchored as a technology for the time being, and not go
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to continue to distribute Hadoop, but I will say, this is important, the artifact we deliver called Hadoop today looks very little like what we were shipping and calling Hadoop back in 2008 when we started the business. The original core components, the scale-out file system and the MapReduce processing engine, they're still in there. But all the action right now is in real time, in SQL, and in-memory analytics. I mean, and we continue to ride the Hadoop elephant because everybody loves that name. But there's a whole lot more to Hadoop today than there was 7 years ago when we got started.
Sure. The question on the venture capital market, you mentioned that capital was easily available compared to what we ever paid before, and technology companies were highly valued. And you also mentioned that there may be a correction. So if there's a correction in the future, what do you think the correction will look like, and how would you prepare for the storm as a strategy officer?
So I didn't say that there would be a correction. I was sort of speculating on how the big buyers are behaving, and one of the preconditions for them entering the market might be that there's a correction in the market. But I don't know that it's going to happen. So I guess that's a way for me to say I don't want to answer the question about the descent of nuclear winter on the financial markets. Right? I don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like the macro picture is pretty good right now. I mean, Europe was scary a while ago, but that doesn't look so bad anymore. And, you know, who knows what else is going to happen in the Middle East, but market valuations don't seem to be badly affected no matter what Iran is doing right now. I think, you know, as an entrepreneur, all of that stuff is external. You've got absolutely no control over what the stock market does or anything else. As a rule of thumb, when it's easy to raise money, you should raise money, right? You ought to be building a business that you're going to be able to scale and get to profitability, and you should always be tracking those metrics. There is so much innovation going on right now that I think many investors are keen to find what looks like it may be the new idea and get you started, right? And if you get a little bit of traction early, raising additional capital has not been too hard. I mean, you got to have a solid business plan. They want a proven team. It's not like it's free money, but there is plenty of money available. And if you can put together the basic building blocks, our experience is there's plenty of money out there.
Time for one last question.
It seems like there's been a lot more talk in the last couple of years about streaming, both streaming data and streaming processing. I'm wondering, I'd be interested to hear how Cloudera is thinking about this, both from a technical point of view and also what you're hearing from the market and the customers you deal with.
So it's been a major area of investment for us. A couple of important technology trends. Streaming data ingest has been an increasingly important workload, and there's some new open source technology out of LinkedIn called Kafka that's quite the hot topic right now. We bundled it into Cloudera. We're working closely with Jay Krebs and the guys at Confluent to be sure that you know, we've got a good solid partnership there. Pretty excited by that. There are other technologies that we pioneered, Flume and Scoop for data ingest. Our bet, and we made it about 2.5 years ago at this point, is very much on an engine out of Berkeley called Spark. You can sort of think of it as Google built MapReduce back in the day because it had an important problem to solve, and MapReduce got a ton of use, and we learned a whole lot about what it was good at and what it wasn't good at and why. The team at Berkeley took those lessons and designed a new system called Spark. It addresses a whole bunch of the shortcomings of MapReduce, and it is much more delightful to program. The APIs are way easier to use. And by the way, it's not hard to be much more delightful to MapReduce. I should say that. Our big bet going forward for stream processing right now is Spark. I don't think it's the last topic. The pace of innovation, as I said, has been really interesting. There continue to be great new interesting ideas tried out in the open source ecosystem. One of the advantages we have is, we get to sit back and watch Darwin work his magic, right? A bunch of flowers get planted, 1,000 bloom. Most of them fall to the side, but a few actually get big and get to the point where they're really credible parts of the platform. So I said that Hadoop doesn't look much like it did. Spark is a big part of our platform now. We're the single largest distributor of Spark on the planet, which is kind of interesting when you realize that Andreessen Horowitz funded a Spark company, right? Enterprises are very keen for this technology. We'll see other streaming solutions emerge in the years to come, and our job as an open source vendor to stay on top of that. But right now, I think the combination of Kafka for streaming data ingest and Spark for stream processing is pretty compelling. We're seeing a whole lot of real-time workloads roll out.
Let's give Mike a round of applause. Thank you.